Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Presence Posse Presents. I'm here with Bobalicious Bobby Cobb, and I'm Miriam Siegel. I love that Bobalicious. I have to think of something creative for myself. We're going to be talking today about presence and demands. None of us have those, so it'll be a short conversation. Demands, things that are required of us or that we require of ourselves. Or what do you think, Bobby?
Well, I think it can be an excellent way of not only staying present, getting present, but noticing if and when you are present. And when I think of demands, I think of things that I don't want to have to do. I don't want to do. It wouldn't be necessarily something that I would want to do, but circumstances as I have organized them and designed them and laid them out are requiring that I do that. And, we all make certain commitments that have certain requirements in those commitments. Not all of them would we necessarily sign up for. And it's a good thing to see what triggers you and a good opportunity for a little self exploration and then, good threads to pull. I like to when things don't go according to plan, I like to pull on those threads and say, all right, what is it that I'm assuming or requiring or resisting, or what's gotten me into a state where I'm just not experiencing the free flow of joy and bliss. Good opportunity for self exploration. If that makes any sense. How about you? What do you think of it when you think of it?
Well, hi, Jan.
Hello.
Look at you and your pretty stripes.
Yeah, I like the stripes.
Thank you.
We're just talking about presence and demands. And actually, I think that's interesting, Bobby, that you talk about things that we don't necessarily want to do, but are required to do in some way. I would just
and I use required there as a very loose thing, because in reality I don't think we're really required to do anything, but certain things, there's certain things that you don't have to get motivated for at all. You're just, you're up for them. If the opportunity presents itself, it's like, oh, good. And then there's other things, do you want to do this? No, but I have to.
Yeah. Because I was actually thinking about when you said required to do, I thought back to my teenage years when I would be required to make the salad, or required to iron my father's handkerchiefs, or required to clean the house or whatever. And that was always like, no, Mom, because I never wanted to do it. And I'm always fascinated by people who actually enjoy housekeeping. And as I got older, I can't say I enjoy housekeeping, but I've become just accepting of it as a meditative activity. It's an opportunity to go into meditation and be present. But when I was a kid, it was, and it's pretty normal for most kids, I guess. If it's not fun, I don't want to be doing it. Or if I don't see any point in it, really, for me, then I don't want to be doing it. But I think demands, in certain ways, some of them they're like necessary evils, and some of them can be, we don't even think about after a while. I was just thinking about brushing my teeth. I do it every day, pretty much. I don't think about it. It's a demand. I wouldn't be in very good shape if I didn't brush my teeth every day, but I don't think about it. I'm not sure we would necessarily classify it as a demand, but at some point it certainly started as one. And then it became like an everyday thing. So yeah, demands on what level, and how they can translate into being opportunities to get present. What about you, Jan? What do you think? I'm demanding that you speak.
There's so many different angles you could come at this from, isn't there? Um, when I think of things like housekeeping and shopping, they feel like demands because they're not things that I necessarily enjoy. But as you said, they can become meditative practices. Um, and then there's things like sleep. My body demands that I sleep and that I eat and drink and move. um, and sometimes I'm present with that, and sometimes I'm not present with those demands, and I override them. And my body lets me know. Um, then there's demands. There are things that might appear like demands on time from other people or commitments.
Yeah.
That got into, there's so many, excuse me, different aspects to this
Hmm.
that, even I was late this evening, and I knew I was going to be late about an hour beforehand. And, I started getting, oh God, I'm going to be late. And what am I going to do? And that's a type of demand, she said I'd be here, so I'd like to be here. And, and then I just remembered, you know, what do people in emergencies do? They don't panic. They don't say stop and panic. Say, stop and get present and assess the situation and see what's going on. And, that's the link with presence for me, is I can get up in my head when I feel like there's demands on me, whether it's a perceived demand or an actual demand. But when I get present, I know what to do, as does anybody else that gets present.
Yeah, and you guys are using demands a little bit differently than I'm thinking of it. I think of housework and shopping as mundane activities, but I don't know why in my mind demand is something. I don't know what the difference of it is in my head. That'll be something that I can maybe explore a little bit later. But for some reason, shopping and cleaning don't feel like something. I, yeah, that's just
It's
in
interesting,
my head.
Bobby.
It doesn't feel like something that I'm obligated to do. Maybe because I don't mind putting it off. If I've got enough food in the house and I want something else, but I don't feel like going shopping, I'm like, well, I don't need to go today.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel like a demand. Does that make sense? Or
It does.
Does that
Does.
fit
And I
with
wonder,
how you guys are using it, or is that a little different?
well, I guess for me, it was a little bit like Miriam. Those were things that were demanded of me from a very young age. And maybe as girls, there was more of a demand on us for those kind of household chores, than maybe there was different demands on guys. I don't know. But the energy of it feels like a demand or of me. Um, and that just could be something that's been carried through time as well, Bobby. And, because when we get present with anything, it's just what's in front of us to be done or not to be done.
Yeah. I do. Miriam's story reminded me of eating dinner over on a school night. First time I'd ever eaten dinner at a friend's house on a school night. So it was a work night for the parents, and they had a much stricter routine. And at one point, my friend's mother asked one of his younger brothers, Eddie, would you like to go get your father some more iced tea? And his response was to get up and kind of shrug his shoulders and walk with just kind of a very demotivated physiology. And he says, no. Would you like to go get your father some tea? No, but I have to. So that very much, I think, is in line with the way that you guys are. Yeah, which is that definitely qualifies as a demand too.
Bobby, it's interesting. I was talking with a bunch of coaches over the last few days, and we were talking about, recognizing when we're in alignment and when, with our wisdom and when we're not. And one of the things that, became clear for me in that conversation was how much, like, the early signals for me that I'm getting out of our alignment are that I'm ignoring the natural demands of my body. Um, like sleeping and eating and exercising. They're the first things to go because sometimes I get into these manic states and I think, oh, I'm in the zone and I'm really productive
Yeah,
and I'm doing it. And,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I'm not, I'm manic. And, during that conversation, I came to see that, my diet isn't healthy anymore and I'm leaning towards convenience foods and, lots of preservatives and, I don't sleep properly. I don't, because I'm working too hard and putting in too many hours and there's no exercise. It's definitely very little time outside. um, and those are very natural demands of a human body. But that now is a real help to me going forward because now I can tune in to the demands of my body. Now that I know that I have these tendencies to override them, and presence is what will do that for me.
Mm.
It was just, I don't know. It's always great to get insights.
Yeah,
That
that's
actually,
that.
yeah,
Go ahead, Miriam.
okay. I was gonna by all means. That has me thinking about ego, the demands that survival places on us, if to put it that way, right? I need to sleep enough, I need to eat enough, and in a healthy way. I need to move, exercise, that kind of thing to keep myself healthy, to keep myself alive. That's a kind of demand as the way we're speaking about it. And to me, that's health. What people rag on ego a lot, but without an ego that's strong enough to make sure that I eat what I need to eat and sleep when I need to sleep and move as I need to move, I wouldn't do very well. I would be sick. I might even be dead. So I like to think of um, ego in that respect as healthy, as something I need in order to make sure that I meet the demands of my body and my life. And even being in the world is an egoic thing for me. So it's a kind of demand as well. I just wanted to put that in the perspective of the topic that we have. And now I'll shut up and let Bobby talk.
Well, I was just as you were mentioning that, Jan, it also popped up to me that demands, and I use ego a little bit differently than you do, Miriam. I think of ego as the container of our conditioning, and it's neither good nor bad. It's just the container, and it's where we put all of our automatic responses in, and the automatic responses can be either good or bad and should frequently be examined. And getting aligned and listening to your body, Jan, I'm brought back to like spring and early summer when my partner and I signed up for a local health club, and I was doing lots of yoga, and egoically I wanted to like see, well, what if I did a dozen? I felt really great because I had done 5. And then I'm like, God, I wonder if I'll feel better with 8. And, then let's do 12. And at the same time, here we have a very short gardening season, and I was taking full advantage of that, and I was out planting. So I was doing lots of forward bending, and it was not, my back was telling me, hey, you're doing too much of this and you're doing it all wrong. And I wasn't listening. I got into that. And for me, my early conditioning was you can do anything. And, like, give me more stuff, put more stuff on my plate. I can do it. I was like a little mini Tony Robbins achievement monster. running from, one list of to-dos to another. And it's the alignment, it's the listening to wisdom that in that case I missed, because my body was telling me, you're doing too much of this, you're overdoing it, you're not doing it right. And I wasn't listening. I just kept pushing. And it wasn't long before, I needed 3 or 4 trips to a chiropractor to unwind my spine so my nerves in my lower back weren't pinched anymore. And that was exactly it. And though in that case, the gardening was a demand of where I live, because I've got a short season, and if I want to be able to have a harvest later, I have to plant now. So that was a self-imposed demand where, I was just demanding for no particular reason all of the yoga classes that weren't doing me any good in the way that I was doing them in that moment. Yeah. So, and that kind of goes back to where I was saying that you guys are using demand a little bit differently, because I'm almost thinking of, well, I guess I have demands that are thrown upon me by things I agree to, that where I'm doing things for other people. Those are the demands that I feel like I really feel pressure. Like I missed last week's podcast because I was out. I got stuck, and I was thinking about, dialing in on my phone for a while, and my phone died. And I couldn't join. And that was massively stressful for me, because I had planned to be on here. I said I was going to be on here, and I didn't make it. And it was like I experienced an enormous amount of stress, 100% of it self-imposed, but it's those demands that, get us mentally time traveling and experiencing an abnormal amount of stress, which again, in and of itself isn't bad, because sometimes that gets a lot of things done and allows us to power through. It's interesting to explore this.
Yeah. No, I like that, Bobby. And, the whole thing with the ego, I see it kind of as both of you guys described it, or, different sides of it, because I know when I get into the manic states that I get into with work, one part of it is the ego, that's just the habitual way of showing up. And the other part of it is the ego that's trying to survive what's going on. And so they're both at play.
Yeah.
And the ego's got different faces in the same scenario. So it's fascinating to explore it and, discover what's going on beneath the surface. And when you were talking about the yoga, Bobby, like, that's another aspect of demands. The body will demand what it needs from us to keep itself in balance. And the further we go from balance, the louder those demands become. They start as gentle whispers, and if we're present, we'll hear them. But they pull us back to presence. If we're not present, the calls will get louder and pull us back to presence, or at least to curiosity, which slows us down. So it's all good, so no matter what's going on, it's fodder for exploration. There doesn't seem to be any, even the demands, like there's all sorts, like you're saying, people putting time on you. I put a huge amount of demands on myself. I overcommit myself all the time and end up in those kind of pressurized situations, trying to meet all the perceived demands, but they're not actually demands. They're decisions that I made myself to put demands on myself. But, the more I take this presence journey, the more that I see that for what it is, and the looser it gets, and it just shows up a bit less and less. So there's something to this presence malarkey.
Yeah, and I love just the idea of looking at what you perceive to be a demand and have that be just another opportunity to check in.
Yeah.
And to see is if, have you pointed out, Jan, if is that something that we're just artificially putting pressure on ourselves, and do we need to do that?
Mhm.
And just explore it. And obviously, yes, I do need to do that. That's a perfectly acceptable answer. And sometimes saying, you know what, yeah, I'm going to do that, but I don't need to do it now. And here's what I need to focus on: getting grounded, centered, and aligned. And like demand, if I think of making a demand cocktail, there's a time pressure as an ingredient. There's a sense of obligation that I'm going to be letting down myself or others. That is a part of that mix. And if you have that feeling pulling you out of the presence, that's a great opportunity to go, all right, what's going on here? I'm feeling this sense of overwhelm. I'm not feeling good right now. I'm feeling anxious or frustrated or whatever that emotion is. And those can all be invitations to explore. And the better that we get at listening to that little voice inside of our head when it still is a whisper,
Yeah, absolutely.
that's such a beautiful thing, because it really, now it creates a little bit more, um, a looseness of freedom, where you can say, all right, no, I don't have to do this right now. I'm going to choose to do this right now. And I think for a lot of people, a lot of times, just that stopping and checking in, giving yourself an out, and then still deciding to go with it, you might approach that activity with a little bit more, enthusiasm may be too strong, but less feeling forced to do it. And maybe it's not too strong. Maybe you can suddenly get enthusiastic about cleaning in a new way. And
Yeah. Poppy, I have a little story about about what you've just been talking about, and that the earlier we listen, when we're getting whispers rather than something screaming at us, the better. One of the things that has really changed for me in the last number of years, since I've got some grounding in the principles and in presence, is that I used to have my to-do list would have at least 12 hours of work on it every day. And I would look at that every morning and go, I got to do all that. And, it's down to about 7 or 8 hours a day these days. But my morning practice now is, what's on there that I don't have to do today? And it gets shrunk a little bit. And it's a process, and it's iterative. But what I have noticed and what has changed is the things I used to be so earnest about, and that I used to bear down on, like that had to be done, and there was no space, like they just had to be done in this time and whatever, really tight. As I started to create a bit of space around those types of scenarios in my work, what I've noticed over and over and over again is that in that space, something shifts in the scenario, and the whole piece of work changes or goes in a different direction.
mm,
And it just shows me every time how I don't have to do it now. I don't have all the information. I don't have to be putting these kinds of demands on myself. And that the more I let go and relax and, just kind of let it evolve whatever way it wants, there's something magical happens. And I'll give you an example. I had a couple of pieces of work come across my desk in the last number of months that I said yes to. And afterwards kind of thought, I'm not really delighted to do that.
what was I thinking?
Yeah, I can do it. I'm able to do it, but does it light me up? No. Um, and in one of them in particular, I started the piece of work, and after one day, I knew I wasn't going to be doing any more of it. But it took me a week to find the courage to actually tell the people that I wasn't going to do it. And it was awkward because I had started it and, got going and gotten information and all the rest of it. But the morning that I had decided I was going to call them, I was sitting at my desk and they called me to tell me something had shifted and they were really sorry, but this had been deprioritized and it wasn't going to happen and it might happen down the road and they'd come back to me. And that's just one example. But, before I had any grounding in this, I would have, because I have started, I have to keep going. I mightn't like it, I mightn't enjoy it.
Right.
It put me over the edge hours wise, knocked me out of bed, but I said I'd do it, so I'm doing it. And I would just bear down single-mindedly and get on with it. And I've really come to see that just the lighter I hold all this stuff, it just sorts itself out most of the time.
Yeah.
It's just.
I've told this story before about dealing with a client who made that point exactly as he started getting more and more present and just suddenly realizing that it was, and he still is a very, very high achiever, accomplishment oriented person. And he started noticing all of these happy coincidences popping up around them and wondered out loud, have they been there all along? And I've just been walking right by them, so focused, living my life with blinders on, that I wasn't paying attention to all of the messages, all of the little flowers popping up along the path that I hadn't been paying attention to.
And all the little miracles of life just taking care of itself. We're not the ones in control, or I'm not the one in control. And I think that was a part of it for me, was, holding it all together and making sure that it went down the right road. And, what right road?
I'd be interested for you guys. I've noticed that as well. And one challenge that I seem to have in having this conversation with friends or colleagues or clients is as we begin to relinquish the need to control everything, which seems to be a phase, at least with the people that are strong achievers, that seems to be, they have this need to be in control of much or anything. And suggesting to them, if you just kind of release the reins a little bit and let life go, you'll be surprised at all of this stuff. They seem to immediately go, so what am I supposed to do nothing, just sit there and let everything happen, not have any influence? And that seems to be some sort of a logical leap that, and maybe it's just the way that I'm having the conversation, that I'm on the conversation trying to suggest to people, no, you don't have to, it's not, I don't even think we could give up trying to influence and control the way that life unfolds. But certainly there still is going to be plenty of things that you're going to be urged to do, but it'll be the things that you're moved to do, as opposed to the conditioned obligations that we seem to, when you have a 12-hour to-do list, my guess is there were probably a lot of conditioned obligations that you were able to say, no, that's only a have to do because I've made it into one. It's not
exactly
with anybody else.
Miriam, you're very quiet.
Yeah. Miriam,
I was just going to come in.
yeah.
Thanks. I muted myself just for you guys to know, and anybody else is watching, because I have a cough, and it can be distracting if I'm just coughing all the time, so I mute myself. But it doesn't mean I don't have anything to say.
I didn't think that for a second.
As I'm sitting listening, I'm also thinking about as we're talking about people putting demands on us, sorry, we put demands on ourselves, people put demands on us. And one of the things I have learned by practicing presence is another person's demand isn't my demand. So whatever pressure they're putting on me because they feel pressured or they have the impression there needs to be pressure, I don't have to accept that pressure and carry it on my shoulders. And being present allows me to understand that there is a separation. Even though there's a connection, there's a separation. So whatever is theirs, and I don't have to own any of it. And then I can do whatever task that needs to be done without feeling the pressure of it, because it's not mine. The pressure isn't mine, it's theirs. And if I'm putting pressure on myself, then I need to take a good look at myself and what I'm telling myself, what kind of world I've created around me in that particular moment, what I think is going on, and separate myself even from that. Like, wait a minute, take the witness position, or the meta position, as I like to call it, and see, is this pressure, is this haste necessary? And sometimes, yeah, but even when there's haste, even when there's necessity, it doesn't have to feel like pressure, and it doesn't even have to feel like a demand. It just becomes something I am doing and being with in the moment. So I don't have to go into I notice, like, the difference between now and 10 years ago is amazing. I don't have to go into any of the old tapes that I had about things being important and I have to do this and I have to do that. I don't have to do anything. As Bobby, you were mentioning earlier, I choose to do it. And I choose to do it from a state of presence and care. Love is often the case with me. Gratitude, in which case it becomes a gift. And now Siri is trying to get into this conversation. I don't know if you heard her in the background. She was speaking Norwegian anyway. Yeah. Haste just becomes something that's quicker. It can be even really fun to experience as I notice what's going on in my body and what's going on around me. And sometimes I do it on purpose. Like, how quickly can I do this? What's my time? Can I do it more quickly next time? Did I cut off a bit of the time from last time? That kind of thing, instead of making into a, oh, my life depends on, even when my life does depend on it, how present am I? And do I have to put any kind of pressure on myself? Because no, generally not. So I just thought I would speak to that, because I used to play that game a lot and fall for it too. Be convinced that, and not only was everything really, really important, I was so important and had to get all of this done because it was me, me, Eckhart Tolle would go, me. And I'm not that important. I really am not. I'm important, but not like that. Nah. It's not worth it. I don't need that kind of ego. When we're mentioning ego, I don't need that kind of ego playing into it. It's much more beautiful to just be with things than to do with things like that. Now I'm noticing you're both staring at me and being very quiet. So what did I say? What have I done now?
I like what you said, and it reminded me of the difference between doing something in a very rushed, frenetic pattern once in a while. It's like if you have to rally to do that on occasion, as you said, that can be fun, as a one-off type of event, and it's very different than if that's your life and your week is 40 or 60 or 80 hours of working under that pace. Then that can be very stressful. And I remember we had somebody in our community whose husband passed away a while back, and she wanted to get a lot of the stuff out of his house. She was selling her house, and there was just a lot of things that had accumulated. It was the house he had grown up in, so he had always lived in this house, and like 15 of us came. Some of the people took the wife out and took her to lunch, and the rest of us were just like moving things. And she had labeled, this is trash and this needs to be given away to Goodwill and this needs to be kept but reorganized. And like the ones that stayed and worked, it was a frenetic pace because we were wanting to accomplish all of this in just a few hours. And we worked our butts off, and everybody's my age. I mean, there were no spring chickens in the group. So it was a bunch of older guys out there chopping stuff down and moving things and loading stuff up in trucks. And at the end of the day of 4 or 5 hours of doing that, working on a deadline, we all kind of sat around and just like, man, that was fun. And genuinely, part of it obviously was that we were doing it for someone else. So anytime that you're working on behalf of a bigger good than yourself, that tends to be, at least from this perspective, it tends to be a little bit more of a effortless thing in general anyway. But yeah, just like getting that one, and as Jan, you mentioned in one of your things that sitting back and recognizing that it is a choice, that both of those things you have to come into presence to say, okay, we can do this, and let's stay present and get all of this work done. Or even if you're just mentally just viewing, is this really something that I have to do? Does it need to be drudgery? And you might just play a little mental game to say, no, that let's make it fun. We'll turn some music on while we're doing the house cleaning that we're not super excited about, and no reason we can't dance while we do dishes.
Yeah.
And maybe turn it into an event that it could get old if you were doing that every single time. I don't feel like dancing today.
Yeah.
But you have to, because that makes doing the dishes fun. All of those things we can question and check in and say, what would make this fun? Or does it even need to be fun? Can it just be something? I mean, brushing my teeth is never fun, but it still gets done a lot.
Yeah. It's interesting, Bobby. There's a Sid Banks quote that says, all we get in this life is the feeling that we live in, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Um, and I like that as a guide. It doesn't have to be happy clappy, major enjoyment all the time, but we get to choose what kind of a feeling we do anything in, if we're present enough to make the choice.
Yeah, that's the
What's they have a phrase that I rarely get right, but all we're ever doing is living in the feeling of our thinking in the moment. Am I close on that?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when Miriam, when you were speaking earlier and you were talking about, the demands that other people, can put on you, and we have a saying here that says, your lack of planning isn't my emergency.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah, that is
Planning
brilliant.
isn't my emergency. That is brilliant.
Yeah.
I can remember being the recipient of something like that. I was a financial advisor, and I had proposed a big retirement plan for a local hospital, and I got down to the final 3 and they picked somebody else. In the end, I really thought I was going to get that, and in my mind that was going to be a life-changing accomplishment, and then I didn't get it, and I was very disappointed. And I bonded pretty well with the decision-making people, and at one point said, I said to them, I have to understand why you've made the decision, because it just doesn't make any sense to me. And I don't remember the response exactly. Was your need to achieve understanding doesn't influence our obligation to do what's right for our employees, and that's what we feel like we've done. So we're sorry it doesn't make any sense to you, but very politely told me tough shit.
Yeah. Wow.
Go pound sand. And I remember initially I was a little frustrated and probably angry at that response, but then after a while I kind of thought, wow, that's how cool is it to be, to be able to say your emergency doesn't, or your lack of planning doesn't make it an emergency in my world.
Yeah.
You know, and that requires presence too, to be able
Yeah.
to, when somebody else is going a little bit off the rails, to be able to say,
Yeah.
not my problem.
Yeah. Or it makes it a little easier to say no if somebody is,
Yeah.
or feels like somebody is putting demands on you, or to say, not now. Yeah, I can do that, but I can't do it now, or today, or this week, or this month, or whatever. And your lack of planning isn't my emergency. We don't have to say the words to them, but it's not a bad mindset to have around demands.
I was just thinking, I offer a program called Undefiable, and we practice presence in Undefiable, but we also practice staying in our power. And it's, as we're talking about your lack of planning is not my experience, I was just thinking that in Undefiable, it's recognizing what is best for me in the moment, taking a decision regarding that, and standing my ground no matter what. And I'm not talking about being obstinate or stubborn or anything like that, or resistant, or it's not that. It's actually being enough in connection with myself that I know what I need to do. I know what's best for me. I make that decision and I stand my ground and let everybody else do what they need to do in whatever reaction they have, and stay in connection with myself, stay present to what's happening. And again, not belittling people or anything like that. It's just staying undefiable. And it is such an important skill to be able to recognize other people's, for example, lack of planning, and then demanding on other people that they make up for it, and knowing what's best for me, noticing if I need to be flexible in some way, meet them halfway, for example, if I'm willing to or can, and otherwise taking care of myself, because that's most important. It's a fantastic exercise and a fantastically important skill to have. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. Another thing, we were just going back to the making things fun. I actually, sometimes I think I make things miserable. How much more boring can this be? How much more miserable can this be? It becomes fun, but in a way, it's not what I'm thinking at the time. If I'm thinking that, oh, I really want to do this, and then I exaggerate that, because I can make it even worse. And what ends up happening is it goes to laughter. It goes to the ridiculous. It becomes entertaining. So sometimes just honoring that, like you talked about, Bobby, was it your brother who get your father the tea or whatever? It was like, no.
Of friends,
Yeah,
of friends' little brother, yeah.
Yeah.
And
So it's like,
friend's
no. Okay, can you say that even
But I
more
have to.
sarcastic? Right? And then it becomes actually but it's honoring that part of myself that really doesn't want to. Because I don't have to change anything. That's not what present's about, at least not for me. It's like, okay, what's in the moment for me? Well, what's in the moment for me is this feels like drudgery. Okay, let it be drudgery.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, let it be even more drudgery. Is it still drudgery? Is there anything in here that isn't drudgery? Or even, what more is drudgery? How much more drudgery can we make? What color is drudgery? Etc. And it's kind of a cool way to train the concept of allowing what is to be, instead of fighting it or trying to change it or thinking I have to be different or whatever. It's like, nah, I don't want to do it. And that is what is. I might still have to, but it doesn't mean I like it. It doesn't mean I want to. And that's the way it is. That's okay. Because very often we beat ourselves up for stuff like that. Oh, I should be grateful. Or we've been told that you should be grateful, or you should this, or you should that. Nah. Well, whatever I should be, I'm not feeling it right now. What I'm feeling is this, and I would need to honor that. This is where I am. This is who I am in this moment.
And do you find as you're doing that ever, and you sound like you're doing it to yourself. I do that in coaching sessions where if I can hear them going down a negative, disempowered path, I might exaggerate that for them. So, I'll say, I feel like I'm hearing you say XYZ, and it will be a couple of orders of magnitude more negative than they said it was. It's like, pulling the slingshot back and letting it go. And they'll very often go, well, no, it's not that. And just in the re-explaining of what it is, very often they will have made another shift. And I said, oh, I get it now. And here's what I was hearing before. Here's what I'm hearing now. And that seems like a shift to me. And very often they say, well, I made that shift. I made that shift on the inside. And it's like, oh, so you are very much in control of your internal experience. Let's play with that a little bit. Does that resonate at all? Is that kind of what you're like, by getting something so monotonous it eventually becomes funny?
Yeah, and I do that with my clients as well. I mean, there are several ways to do that kind of thing. I think as long as a client feels seen and heard and respected, and I mean, the minute we give space to what is, really, that is the ultimate love, isn't it? It's like, you're okay exactly how you are in this moment, and it is what it is. And then they can just, it's okay. Or if they need to do more or whatever, then it's okay. It's all good. And my rule is, don't hit anybody. Don't hit me. Right. And sometimes I do a lot, like I'll put up a pillow and hold it in front of me and hit the pillow. You can push me around the room as much as you want, but it's the pillow, right? Because some people actually don't have those clear boundaries. And it's good to actually make them very visible, that this is okay, but this is not okay. And whenever it shows up, it's like, okay, that wasn't okay, but this is okay. And then they learn. But any moment that is, it's like giving space to what is in that moment, whether it's boredom or heaviness or laughter or whatever it is such a loving reflection. And when everything's okay, it ceases to be that much of a problem, in my experience. And then anything can happen.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to fight. It just flows more, is my experience.
They used to say something similar about Milton Erickson, the famous linguist. And I've heard it said in a few different occasions that his real talent wasn't linguistics, that his real talent is what you just spoke about. That when he worked with people, he offered unconditional love. They were welcome, and whatever they brought was welcome and okay. And he accepted people as they were with whatever they brought and agreed with everything they said. And that was the experience then, was as people there was no resistance coming back at people, or no sense of resistance. So people would process everything. They would just keep talking and have their own insights and realizations, and things would unravel and unfold. And all he did was create that safe, non-judgmental, welcome space where people and all of their thoughts and all of the ways they showed up were welcome and okay. It's such a beautiful space, but it's not one that people experience very often.
Yeah, and I think another ingredient to that is helping people understand that where they are in this moment was part of their journey, and it is inevitable that you ended up here.
Yeah.
And how do we know that? Because we are here right now. So now that you're here and now that you realize all of that and you can see it in a judgment-free way, what's next? And and that does create space, which creates options and room for insight and aha moments, as well as to try something new that you've never tried before.
Well, people let down their guard and they have that exhale.
Yeah.
And as you say, that creates space and something new can come through. Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
thanks, Miriam, for bringing that up. It's really important.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I've been thinking also a little bit about demands, as far as people demanding that we be a certain type of person or act in a certain way in certain circles, or just in a family, where we're told to be this and be that and do this and do that, as almost like a condition for being in the world. And very often it starts at a very young age. I mean, from the moment we're born, really. We're born with that kind of expectation and demand on us already, most of us anyway. Most parents have some sort of demands that they put on their child even before they're born. They're already talking about school. And I talked to a couple of several years ago, and they were talking about what they knew they were going to have a boy. And it was like, he's going to like this sport and this sport, and I'm just like, what if he's a gay ballet dancer? I mean, it was just so bizarre to listen to that conversation. And so, and at a young age, very many, I mean, we're born in presence, we're born aware. This is what I remember from my own childhood and early childhood. I was just, everything was just, I wasn't even everything was just everything. And it becomes less about awareness and more about survival in so many ways, living up to, like, being told how to behave and how to perform and how to speak and all of that in order to make it through every day in these circumstances. It's almost, we're conditioned to be in survival mode, even for people who don't experience huge traumatic experiences. Almost like we're being conditioned to be traumatic on a daily basis. And it seems so bizarre to think that we have to train ourselves to come back to what we started with. But because of all of that conditioning, all of those demands put on us, of course we do. Yeah. The few of us who are lucky that never lose our presence and our awareness, God bless them. But I think I would venture to say the majority of us do. And again, it becomes unveiling and discovering these hidden demands, and hidden in the way that we've been so conditioned since birth, we don't even notice them anymore.
Yeah.
We don't even see that we're walking around with all these different identities and roles and things and doing and doing and doing. And that they're all demands placed on us, sometimes and very often really with the intention of keeping us safe and alive. Because why would our parents teach us to be this way and this way unless they wanted us to be safe? But then their idea of safe may not be what is safe, and it may not be necessary anymore even. So sometimes the journey into presence and demands needs to go back to even before we were born, and looking at that kind of expectation and letting those things go, and go into our own little submarine into ourselves and find out who was really there to begin with and who's there now and how much more can we uncover. And even if we don't dare to reveal that to the general population immediately, we can at least acknowledge in ourselves that we have these parts of ourselves that we've lost touch with, we are regaining touch with.
Yeah.
And then the demands, we can let them go and keep the ones that we find useful or necessary and take them out and put them on when we need them, and otherwise take them off, and because we don't, because every situation is different, and we do, in the majority of situations, need to show up in some sort of way that other people can understand as well, without being not present, but in some way, some relational way, because we are relational beings. That might have been a bit confusing. I hope it wasn't, but I just wanted to touch on that point.
I think it's pretty clear, actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're coming up at the top of the hour, and Miriam, I know you have got you highlighted it or mentioned it briefly, your new program that you're kicking off. I would love to hear a little bit more of that about that, if you wouldn't mind sharing, if you're still got room to enroll people in that, if they feel like that's something that they would like to be involved with.
Thank you. I am definitely still enrolling people. It is a program called Undefiable. And I was thinking about it earlier today. People who know, if you know you have a leader in you, but the leader hasn't come out yet, or you don't have anyone to lead, and you need to build, or you feel you need to build the skills in yourself necessary to be that leader and not back down. Undefiable is that kind of program. It's a 12-week program where you train different essential life skills that lead to undefiability. And the more you master the skills, the more undefiable you are. Now, I'm not referring to being defiant. As I was mentioning earlier, it's not about resistance and not, what's the word? Working together. I can't think of it in
collaborative or
yeah, right. It's not about resistance or anything like that. Undefiability is very much about standing your ground, being in your power, knowing who you are and where you're going, and staying on that path, and having the constitution and the strength and the undefiability to stay on that path. So that's what my program is. There are two options for the program, and one is completely self-study, and the other one is with extra teaching sessions. There'll be group teachings every other week on the lessons, so that you get feedback on how you're doing. And if you haven't quite understood, or you're not doing things correctly, or you wonder if you're doing things correctly, you get feedback on that. And I teach a little bit and come with examples and that sort of thing. So there are two options for it, because some people manage on their own and some people really want the extra help. So yeah, that's how I do that. If you want to, I'm going to put my thing up here. If you're interested in finding out more, the website is www.centremex.com, and you can contact me at the email address here. Centremex is Center for Mastery and Excellence.
Ooh.
Center for Mastery and Excellence. I just shortened it to Centremex because it's a really long name. Imagine typing that in every time you're trying to find the center.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for asking, Bobby. And how about you?
I don't have anything going on right now. I am gearing up for a program that I'm going to release in the new year, once probably like the second week in January. I'm going to be doing a program as well. If you'd like to just be up to date on that, it's going to be about really delving into presence in a big way and looking at ways that we can invite more of it in our lives, and using things like the feeling of demand as a little alarm to stop and check in and get grounded, centered, and aligned, and make sure that we are in our power. So there'll be more about that. If you'd like to just be in a place where you can hear about it when it is available, my group on Facebook called Our Mindful Life, and you can just put that into the search bar. It'll take you right there. It's a free group, and that's kind of the Facebook repository for all of the work that I do. So if you want to join that, you'll be on the notification list when that rolls out in the new year.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Bobby. And Jan?
I don't have any programs coming up, but I do have a handful of openings in January for one-to-one coaching, and these would be either 6 or 12-month coaching packages. And they're really around aligning presence, performance, and well-being. So if that's something that's of interest to any of our listeners, I'd be happy to hear from you, and you can DM me and be happy to chat.
Presence, performance, and well-being. I love
Yeah.
that. Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have now come to our hour, the end of our hour. So I will thank first all of you who have been watching and commenting. And now the panel, Bobby Cobb and Jan Hart, and I'm Miriam Siegel. We are the Presence Posse, and we will be back next Monday with a new topic about presence. And you are more than welcome to join us in our Facebook group, our free Facebook group, the Presence Posse. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you again next week.
Ciao for now.
Bye.